If you remember 2021, when there was no supply of cars and prices went absolutely insane and you couldn't get a used car for less than like 20 grand, like we're about to see that exact same thing happen.
Hello and welcome back to the Plugged In Podcast, a weekly news show about the future of transportation. I'm Patrick George, Editor-in-Chief of InsideEVs.
And I'm Tim Levin, Senior Reporter at InsideEVs. This week we're very pumped to be speaking with Andrew Cornelia, CEO of Mercedes-Benz High-Power Charging. We'll talk about why the automaker got into the charging space, how to make plugging in your car a better experience, and a whole lot else.
Before that, we have some news to cover, and hilariously, me and Tim Levin tried to record this on a Tuesday morning. We were like, we don't have anything to talk about. There's no news yet. And that was the stupidest thing we've ever said, because now we're drowning in it. Among what we're going to cover today, EV startup Rivian is launching its own micro-mobility company called Also, and Hyundai just opened its giant new EV meta plant in Savannah, Georgia, which is where I was 24 hours ago.
Yeah, and we won't even get into some of the biggest news this week, which is Nissan and tariffs. Nissan is launching a whole bunch of new EVs, including a new Leaf and potentially a new Xterra EV. And tariffs are hitting the auto industry for real this time. 25% tariffs on all imported cars.
It's a lot to unpack. Before we dig into the news, I'm kind of driving. I got back from this Savannah, Georgia trip with Hyundai and got to drive home in a Dodge Charger EV Daytona.
Yes.
Scat Pack with the track package. That's its full Christian name. And the world's first like purely electric American muscle car. And I think this thing's a hoot so far, man. I know it's been kind of controversial because there's a lot of questions as to whether like the Mopar, the Hemi guys like actually wanted a car like this, but I think it's fun as hell, you know?
I'm glad to hear that. You know, I for one have been pretty doubtful about this car's potential. Like, you know, maybe it makes us think maybe there are some cars that don't need to be EVs. You know,
Yeah.
Dodge took this big risk, and they were like, all right, we're gonna take the muscle car package, we're gonna make it like a really sick, really fast EV, and I don't know if those kind of categories of buyers really mix, but it's good to know that you know, at least the execution is decent.
Yeah, I'm having fun in it. And, you know, the specs on this one, dual motor, all-wheel drive, 670 horsepower, 3.3 seconds, 0 to 60, which makes it one of the quickest, like almost the quickest, like Dodge muscle car ever.
Yeah.
As an EV, it's kind of weird. Like one-pedal driving is weird. Regen braking is weird. But like, I like the simulated exhaust sounds and engine notes in there. And, you know, to your point, like the thing on my mind when I was driving home late last night, let me tell you, that thing will keep you awake on the road if you've had a long day, is that, you know, if you're like a Mopar guy or you're really into, you know, the Hemi vibe, like, and you're open to electric cars at all, like give this thing a try, because you'll probably really like it.
One.
I just don't know if that person exists or not. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And so did you hear so like, for people who don't know,
Yeah.
it doesn't just have, like, a lot of EVs will have simulated kind of driving noises inside the car.
Yeah.
The Charger Daytona also has that pumping outside the car, like this super loud, I don't know, maybe it's insulting to them to call it like a speaker system, but it's this like
Basically
it's this
is.
like simulated exhaust that just like blasts kind of engine noises out the back. Did you get any experience with that? Did you hear that?
Yeah, you know, they realized at Dodge that it's not a real Mopar muscle car if you're not constantly terrorizing your neighbors and making everyone hate you.
Yes.
So like I picked it up at this parking garage in Manhattan, and it was on. It sounds insane to say this about EV. It was idling and rumbling. I mean, the damn thing is loud. It's much louder outside than inside. Like I think that the engine sounds that I was hearing last night, just driving on the highway at speeds that I'm not going to admit to on this podcast for fear of self-incrimination. It's kind of a subtle engine sound inside. Like I didn't mind it. Like I like the quiet of EVs, but it's like barely there. But when you're out in it, like near the car, like you hear that thing, and if you unless you notice the lack of tailpipes, I don't think you'd mistake it for an EV. So it's interesting. We'll have a full review of that with a video coming soon to InsideEVs, and I'm excited to put it through its paces.
Yeah, that's cool. I think I'm excited to hear more about that next week. But first, we should get into our first story about Rivian. So an electric micro-mobility company backed by Rivian and co-founded by Rivian CEO RJ Scaringe came out of stealth this week, and it's called Also. Also, there's nothing after that. It's just called Also.
Also, yes.
According to the company, flagship EV products will launch in 2026. They'll be sold globally and hit both consumer and commercial needs. You wrote the story on this, and you talked to the head of Also. Break down for me what this company is doing, because they're being pretty secretive about it. Are we talking e-bikes? Are we talking scooters? What's in the cards here?
Yeah, it's also is interesting, right? It's definitely not something I had on my dance card this year, but I spoke to Chris Yu, who was most recently VP of Future Programs at Rivian, and he's now the president of Also. We'll get to the name in a second, but he said that it kind of started as like a skunkworks program within Rivian like 3 or 4 years ago, and they said that they quote unquote incubated it within the company and decided to kind of spin it off into its own thing, and they raised $105 million in capital from it. So they've called it like a sibling of Rivian, which is really interesting here. And so what's the product going to be, right? And that's the $105 million question, I guess. And what they've said so far is it's 2-wheel, 3-wheel, and 4-wheel vehicles, all electric, all with a kind of like Rivian-esque like software ecosystem, and that Rivian approach to building things like Tesla does. Like everything is done in-house, top to bottom, and they said everything south of a homologated car, and that means like, for something to be like a car, it has to meet certain regulations to be on the road. But below that, like a scooter, a bicycle, a neighborhood electric vehicle, like a golf cart or like a Ranger or something like that, a 4x4, like those don't have to meet as many strict regulations to be on the road. But they're also kind of speed limited usually, and they're easier to deploy internationally. And Also's theory is that as more people are living in cities, and cities are cracking down on emissions in different ways, and the e-bike space is blowing up, like more and more people are going to be looking for electrified ways to get around town for short trips and for urban living. And they think that Also is going to have a product and then a line of products that are really going to appeal to those folks who are looking for like a good way to like take their kids to school or get to the grocery store or something without necessarily like having a full-blown car and paying for one.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool idea. Here in Berkeley, I see tons of parents taking their kids to school or getting groceries on like electric cargo bikes, which is just such a great way to get around. It's like you don't have to park, you don't have to pay for gas or for kilowatts in your kilowatt hours in your electric car. It makes a lot of sense for city living, and even things like little delivery vehicles and stuff. Could also make a lot of sense. I do wonder in the e-bike space, I wonder what exactly their differentiator is going to be. Like they talk about, obviously Rivian's good at software, that kind of thing. They're good at kind of user experience. Maybe that'll be their edge. But yeah, what about that name? Did they tell you anything about it? To me, it kind of rings of like, they're like, remember, this isn't instead of your Rivian. This isn't instead of cars. It's on top of cars. Don't buy one of these instead of buying a Rivian.
I think that speaks to the name, right? Like that's why they're doing it. And a friend of mine made kind of a who's on first joke with this. It's like, oh, it's with Also who? Oh, it's with Which is our software company. With which one? Oh, that's with our other software company, but it's not with Volkswagen. Like with Volkswagen or with Volkswagen. But I'll stop now.
Very good.
I find that 100-year-old comedy bit still hilarious today, even though like no one knows the hell I'm talking about. But yeah, it's an I think it was fascinating that they kind of launched this without any kind of teaser product. Like they're definitely driving it on like Rivian hype, but I think this is notable because lots of car companies have said they want to become mobility providers, and they'll come out with like a scooter concept or like a bold 2 or 3 wheel pod car concept, and they never really come out with them or do anything with them ever. I think kind of the worst offender here is probably Toyota, which feels like it does that like every couple of years, and will maybe put out a car like that in Japan only, and then just do nothing else ever. Like it's like a lot of them are kind of paying lip service to the idea of mobility, but what they really know how to do and want to do is build cars. And so I applaud Rivian for like, actually trying to do the thing. They say they're going to unveil the flagship product at the end of this year, and deliveries will start soon after that. So I took that to mean like later this year or early 26. It'll come to Europe after that. It's going to be built at a bunch of different contract factories, and have this kind of Rivian-esque approach to like walking up to it, and it recognizes it's you based on your smartphone app, and it sets all the preferences to what you want. Like all these different things that Rivian's really good at, it's going to bring to that space. And I'll just add this quote from Chris Hughes, also as president. He says, quote, "Right place, right timing. Micromobility and small EVs are kind of following cars and technology adoption. But you can imagine a really diverse set of opportunities and use cases down the road. And there's such a huge opportunity and such a big problem to solve." He's basically talking about how do people get around cities and even neighborhoods more easily than, having to drive everywhere. So excited to see how this goes, man.
I think also if they end up putting out,
you think also?
Oh God,
I don't know.
It's hard to talk about this company. I think
I won't do it again. I swear. I promise.
Okay. Moreover,
additionally,
I think if they can put out a neighborhood electric vehicle, which is like, below a car, like kind of a car, kind of like a golf cart type thing, which they do exist. Like there are vehicles that you can put on the road that you can drive at like under a certain speed, under like, I don't know, 30 miles an hour. It depends on where you are. But those things exist, and none of them are really cool. I think if also can put out something that's really cool that people want to buy, I think they could actually do well. Like there's somebody in my neighborhood that drives a Gem, which maybe we'll put up a picture now. It kind of looks like,
I know what you're talking about.
It's like round roof. It's like what the parks people drive around parks, kind of.
It's like Epcot Center shit. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's a weird little golf cart. But like it has some range. You can drive it around. You can get groceries. Like it kind of makes sense. But not exactly sexy. So if also can make some sexy NEVs, I might buy one.
Yeah, this was part of their thesis too. Like I'm paraphrasing here, but they were kind of like, look, the mobility space now, it's a lot of smaller companies. It's like Chinese imports. It's tiny operations. Like no one's really ever done this like full force end to end. We control the software. We do this in a really big, coordinated way. And yeah, so like I think they're onto something cool here. I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, same. Also, Hyundai Motor Group officially opened its Meta plant this week, a $7.6 billion factory in Georgia that'll build EVs and hybrids. You were actually there this week. Really busy week for you, Patrick. I don't know how you're like standing right now or sitting. But yeah, give us the download on the Meta plant.
Yeah, I was a day ago was in Savannah, Georgia, quick trip down there, which lovely town, by the way. I've heard great things about Savannah, and I really want to go back and hang out on my off time now. But you drive about 30 minutes outside of Savannah, you will not miss on the highway the Meta plant because it is gigantic. It's right off the freeway. It is 16 million square feet. And this is a brand new factory. This isn't a retrofit or an add-on of something old. This is completely from the ground up. And I think that it's one of the most high-tech car factories, not just in America, but in the entire world. I've never seen anything like this. And I've been to several car factories as part of my job, but like it's super quiet inside. Humans are working everywhere with no ear protection because they don't need to, because it's been designed to be so quiet. It's super heavily automated. There are robots everywhere. There's like these robotic pallets scooting around the floors that take car parts different places, or take completed cars, or take like cars that aren't fully assembled yet to their destinations. And when they're out there mingling with humans, if they see a human walk in front of them, like they'll kind of stop a little bit. Like I had to sort of dodge some robots while I was there. But it's mega ambitious of Hyundai, and it's going to make the Ioniq 5 and Ioniq 9. And I really like the Ioniq 5. I love that design, and this is kind of like a, well, no duh, Patrick, it's a car factory moment, but like I've never seen so many Ioniq 5s in my life. And to see this design I like just everywhere, all the dies and the doors and the, dashboard components and the batteries just floating around, everything being built. And the Ioniq 9 too, the 3-row SUV, which is a really striking car too.
Yeah.
Just like on the same assembly line being built together. It's like, this is their like mega EV factory in this country. And over time, it's going to make hybrid cars as well. It's going to make Kias as well. They haven't said what kind, but as part of this grand opening yesterday, which was like a huge deal, like Georgia Governor Brian Kemp was there. At least one of their Congress people was there. I get to talk to him a little bit. They had South Korea's ambassador to the United States joined. I think just about every Korean business journalist doing that job got shipped over to see it. It's a major economic development. In fact, it's the biggest economic development in the history of the state of Georgia. It's going to bring at least 14,000 jobs, and they think all the related industries will bring about 100,000 jobs. And one more number for you, or I guess two rather, is initially they said they were going to build 300,000 cars there annually, but yesterday they announced that they are going to up that to 500,000 cars. And that's a really big deal for them. And I think the current moment that we're in had a lot to do with that timing, because I think, Hyundai, like every automaker, knows they're about to get slammed with tariffs. The United States is their biggest market. Like a third of their global cars are sold here. They're really trying to they're really trying to ramp up their U.S. manufacturing presence. And this factory's been in the works for a long time, but like now they're like, okay, we're going to have to build a lot more cars here. And all the elected officials in that district are pretty over the moon about it, as they should be, I think, for a project that size. But really, really magnificent to see.
Yeah, that's really cool. I recommend it to anybody who hasn't. If you can get yourself into a car factory and tour it, it's really cool to see cars getting built. Like just how complicated it is. Seeing all the those like individual parts come in and become like a car is it's kind of amazing to see. But yeah, and it was really interesting. Hyundai kind of, and I'm ripping off a little bit. I'll cite my sources here. Axios had a really good story about this the other day, which is that Hyundai did a really good job of making it seem like this was all because of Trump, because of his policies. Bringing car manufacturing back to America because of tariffs, when in fact, all of this was in the works before Trump took office. It was partially probably because of the Biden administration's policies that were like incentivizing electric vehicle manufacturing and battery manufacturing in the U.S. They decided to put this giant plant in Georgia. They also, like this week, they've been on kind of this media tour. They announced also several $billion investment to build a steel mill in Louisiana, which again was like something that was in the works before. But I guess they'll take what they can get, and it's kind of a little bit of a masterclass in like, how do you deal with this administration? How do you make them feel good about the policies that they're implementing? And Hyundai's doing a good job at that.
Yeah, and it's also just like a lot of like right place, right time investments paying off too. I mean, like this factory was actually, they started planning it in the first Trump administration, like before Biden came in, and they take pains to say like, well, they planned it before the IRA happened. It was like they kind of knew some incentive program might happen. They kind of knew that like EVs were going to take off in some way, but they also knew that they had to become less export dependent as a company. But I bring this up not because all of you find like, global manufacturing logistics planning to be the most fascinating thing about EVs, but like when we're talking about tariffs, like the president is doing now, those supposedly go into effect April 3rd. The way to get them around them, you got to build your car in the United States. All right, so this factory I was just at, they started planning it during Trump's first term. And it's now open in full effect at the end of Q1 2025. That's how long it takes to like build a car factory or ramp up car production in the United States. Like it takes a long time. Then there's questions like, okay, where are you going to get the labor from? How are you going to train those workers? How are you going to, get the infrastructure for all these places? Like these things take time. And I do get what the president's trying to do here, right? Like I think everybody would agree that like more American jobs, more American manufacturing after decades of outsourcing and offshoring would be a good thing. But like, to me, it feels like the smarter play is like, yeah, these tariffs that go into effect in 2027, like, or 2028, like govern yourselves accordingly.
Right. Get ready.
You got 3 years to get ready for this, or like the sword's going to come down. That would have been a game changer, as opposed to like sticking 25% price increases on half the cars Americans can buy. So I don't know. It's trickier than they think, but I think that Hyundai's moves mean it's going to pay off. And it's also like they're going to make all kinds of cars this meta plant, hybrids too, but it's like these are the EVs that are going to duck the tariffs now. We know that, right? Like it'll be the Ioniq 5, the Ioniq 9. So if you're EV shopping after April 3rd and this stuff really is going into effect, and it's not just like a threat or something, like, I don't know, those cars are going to shake out better than other ones. So, it's
it's pretty cool. Yeah. When you put it that way, it is really right place, right time, because when you look at a lot of the most popular EVs that are sold in America, a lot of them are about to get hit by tariffs. If you're not talking Teslas, because they're made in California and they're made in Texas, but like Ford Mustang Mach-E, made in Mexico, Chevy Blazer, Chevy Equinox EVs, made in Mexico, Honda Prologue, made in Mexico. The one that's kind of near the top of the sales list that is not is the Ioniq 5, and they just started making it in America. Like, it wasn't this week. They've actually been making it for a little while now, but good on you, Hyundai,
Yeah, for real. So we're fascinating to see where all of that goes the next few months. Or 1 week. I don't know. Who knows anymore?
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Here's our conversation with Andrew Cornelia, CEO of Mercedes-Benz High Power Charging.
All right, we have a very special guest with us today. As longtime listeners of the Plugged In podcast know, we talk about charging and charging access a lot, because that's something we found to be true with the EV sector. It's not really the cars that are so much of the problem. It's how to, quote unquote, fuel them. And the guy we're talking to next leads up a very interesting initiative that looks to fix some of those charging headaches for, one brand in particular, but also every EV driver out there. We're happy to be joined today by Andrew Cornelia, the CEO of Mercedes-Benz High Power Charging. Andrew, thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. Patrick, Tim, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much. I guess just to get started, like, for people who don't know, what is Mercedes-Benz High Power Charging, and kind of why did Mercedes decide to get into the charging game directly instead of, just investing in somebody or doing something else?
Yeah, so I appreciate the time. It's great to have this conversation. I think it's timely, given everything that's going on in the industry and the world. But, said simply, Mercedes-Benz High Power Charging is Mercedes-Benz approach to public charging. We are building what will be the fastest charging network in North America, and really borrowing from the Mercedes-Benz legacy, right? Mercedes-Benz has been the first in so many ways to build the first aluminum body vehicle, the first, anti-lock brake system, really setting the standard around automotive. And that's what we're looking to do with the charging business here. So this is our attempt to build a North American charging network. As I said, really focus on building the fastest, most accessible charging network open to all drivers, and really looking to set the standard for the utility of charging, making sure that it works every single time, but also the experiences around charging.
Yeah, let's set some table stakes here, right, real fast. Because for the longest time in the charging sector, as you know, it was like in America, there was Tesla and there's everybody else.
Sure.
So just to be clear for our listeners, what we're talking about is not just exclusive to Mercedes-Benz EVs, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. I mean, look, if we just built for Mercedes-Benz, we'd be building for 10 to 15% of the market. That's not our goal. Our goal is not to just solve the charging problem for Mercedes. It's to help solve the charging problem for the industry. And I think you guys can appreciate that. That is still one of the challenges, one of the barriers for EV adoption is reliable, high-speed charging that everybody has access to. So we want to solve that challenge.
Mm-hmm. And like, when you say solve the challenge, like, where do you think that historically the charging industry has fallen short? Like, what, you obviously go in because you feel Mercedes feels that people aren't being served in the way they should be with EV charging. Like, what are those big kind of gaps that you're trying to fill?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to three things. One is accessibility, two is quality, and three is experience. So let me circle back on those. One, we are seeing, and regardless of who you talk to, the numbers are increasing in terms of EV penetration. The fleet increases every single day.
Yeah.
Percentage of new cars sold continues to increase. But that percentage of EV adoption is actually outpacing the number of fast chargers in the market today. And if you look back 5 years, there was already a gap, meaning the supply side of charging was not matched to what we needed from the demand side, the vehicles on the road. And we're actually seeing a further gap develop within the industry. So accessibility, we want to build charging where people are today, where they're going tomorrow. So really looking at sort of the pockets of EV adoption today and over time, and making sure that we put charging in those markets to meet those needs. That's number one. Number two is quality. And I think, all of us have probably, been in the scenario where we show up to a charging station, no names, but it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work the way we expect it to work. I mean, I think about charging like I think about a bridge or a road. It's critical infrastructure. You show up, and the first time you plug in, the first time you try to authenticate, the first time, you pull into a parking stall, you don't need to kind of, move your vehicle, it works. So we're looking to solve that in terms of the utility of charging. I think the golden metric is first time charge success. It works every single time. Plug in, walk away, charging should take 5 seconds. So that's number two. And then three is, and I've said this for a long time, that, charging should not be the experience. And I joke around, guys, and I know this will, relate to, you, which is, one of our partners is Buc-ee's. And I joke and say that my favorite charging experience recently was the Buc-ee sandwich I had at, one of these locations. And that is the experience, right? We want to build amenity matched experiences around charging so that, what you do while you charge is more important than the charging experience. But this has to be a bridge, right? We have to work our way up to that point where experience is what we want to solve for, but you can't do that unless you have the network built and you have the quality standards, hit.
For those who don't know, like Buc-ee's is a Texas staple where I'm from. It's this vast network of like mega gas stations, and they have like a bazillion pumps at each one. They're famous for their super clean restrooms. It's like a rest stop meets a mega mall almost, and they're spreading across the country. And like, it's a smart company because now they're getting really big into the EV charging space because they want to serve everybody too. So, which is kind of like what you guys are doing. I mean, tell me about what perks Mercedes-Benz EV owners here would get if they stop to charge at your network that happens to serve every driver.
Well, it's a good question, right? I mean, we are a OEM-backed charge point operator. So, we do have multiple motivations to build this network. Predominantly, as I said, we do want to move the industry forward. I mean, that is, face value, what we're trying to solve. It's good for the industry. It's good for our business. We also, though, want to sell cars, right? So we do want to provide special benefits to the Mercedes-Benz driver, but really as sort of an incubation engine for how the industry should move forward writ large. So, Mercedes-Benz will have first access to some of these features that over time will be available to other parts of our network as well. So today, the Mercedes-Benz drivers get reservations at our charging networks. So essentially, like almost a airport, flight control, as you're coming into land, you do get assigned to one of the charging spots on our network so that you can make sure that when you show up, you have a location identified and designated for you.
I love that.
Yeah. And, over time, also, we'll find more ways to promote, benefits for our drivers, but also make sure that these are shared across our full segment of drivers.
That's awesome. It often feels to me that like the car companies got so used to all these other industries springing up around them, like gas stations, insurance, repair shops, and like, well, that'll clearly happen with EVs, right? And what you guys found is that in this space, it really didn't, or like not as fast, right? So this is kind of Mercedes-Benz taking matters in their own hands. And like my as I've written about this before, my joke has always been you don't want to buy $100,000 electric Mercedes-Benz and be charging like next to a combined pile of snow and trash, like behind a Walmart, right? Like you want a nicer experience than that. Yes.
Well, totally. I mean, it's not really a joke. I mean, it's reality, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we used to say a couple of years ago that, Mercedes-Benz was never in the business of building gas stations. Why would we build a charging station? And I think that was, for many OEMs, kind of the thought process. But, I think you guys can appreciate this better than anybody else, that buying a car today is not what it used to be, right? We're not buying, 4 wheels and an engine block. We're really buying, a smartphone on wheels. We're buying, something that can be updated over time with, software releases. We're buying, this drivetrain that's more efficient, has less maintenance, more, sort of power, in terms of, its ability. So one of the things that we're selling, it's not just, again, an object, we're selling the consumer experience. So if you drive off a Mercedes-Benz lot, we want to make sure that you have that Mercedes-Benz experience, not just when you're buying the car, but when you're owning that car as well. So that's really sort of, the genesis for why we built our charging network is we want to make sure that we can extend that brand promise now into the wild and make sure that every Mercedes driver that buys an electric vehicle has that experience over their life. But even more important than that, guys, it's that we can extend that brand promise to the whole industry. Because again, we do think that Mercedes represents something. 130 years of heritage. The pictures behind me, it definitely does represent something for people. So part of this is also changing the vernacular around charging for the industry to say, Mercedes-Benz charging, it works. Mercedes-Benz charging, it's not just about the charging, it's that great brisket sandwich or that cup of coffee that you can have while you charge. So we want to reset the standard for what charging is.
Mm-hmm. And so give us like the lowdown on when did you build your first station, and kind of what's the state of the network as it stands right now? Where are the stations? How many do you have? That sort of thing.
Yeah, candidly, we're early, right? This is a multi-decade investment that Mercedes-Benz has signed up for. Today, we have about 250 ports. So, we can charge, 250 simultaneous vehicles in the market.
It's nationally, yes?
Yeah. Yeah, that number is increasing significantly month over month. We've just installed our first location with our second, major national partner, Siemens. We will have, one of our first locations in the ground with Starbucks, another national partner, by the end of this year, early next year. So we're looking to continue to grow our network. But when it started, it was really about 1.5 to 2 years ago, with sort of the inception of this idea. And then, as we continue to think about, the partners that we want, where we want to put these, stations, it's evolved since then. But, I like to joke that, we are a startup within the Mercedes-Benz, larger organization. So, we are in scale mode right now to kind of build this startup within the parent company.
And they've been doing a lot of just tech stuff at Mercedes-Benz in general, like skunkworks projects with software. And I think of a lot of the established OEMs, like Mercedes is kind of out there at trying stuff, I think, more than people realize, right? Like even like level 3 autonomy in some states. Yep. It seems like that company's kind of trying to be more, get in the cutting edge of what's next. Yes.
I think you have to, right? Again, this industry is evolving across the full value chain, whether it's, AI, whether it's robotics, whether it's, battery recycling, charging. I think, the commitment that Mercedes has made across all those value chains is that we want to be the leading edge, right? We want to test and iterate, and we want to make sure that we can continue to deliver on our promise, which is to deliver the most excellent and desirable vehicles. But again, it's the driver experience now that we're delivering across that value chain. So there's a lot more components involved with it. Yeah.
And I know that you guys kind of just finished maybe what you'd call your first like network of chargers in Texas. Why Texas? Like what dictated that kind of rollout? Why Texas? And tell me a little bit about that project.
I think there's a few things here, right? One is, if our goal is to help move the industry forward, we have to build to where the vehicles are today. We're not field of dreams, build it and they will come. I think there's some value to that, but we want to make sure that we're meeting the demand in the marketplace. So Texas Triangle, between the 3 major cities in Texas, that is a huge bedrock for EV adoption today. regardless of, the color of the state, people are buying electric vehicles there in, masses.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make sure that we could, help solve that, supply demand, gap that we're seeing between EV ownership today and, the supply of high quality charging. So we've built out, the Texas Triangle so that people can drive with confidence between those major cities and have that experience in doing so. And then, with our partner Buc-ee's, we've been able to do that with a very consistent experience across all of those stations. But we won't stop there. I mean, we did announce last year our partnership with Starbucks. And, one of the highest EV penetration states in the country is California. We'll be building out, the whole I-5 with the Starbucks partnership to go from the border of Canada down to the border of Mexico so that you can have a like experience, albeit with a different partner.
When you're talking about the Texas Triangle, just to be clear, you're talking Dallas, Houston, San Antonio area. That's a big swath of land. Like you could drive in those three, and you'd be at that the better part of a day, right? Yeah.
Well, again, I mean, I love the Buc-ee's partnership, one, because you're approaching a Buc-ee's from about 100 miles away. You got these big billboards up there. It's Buc-ee's 100 miles, and then you're at mile 90, and it says it again.
Yeah.
When you get there. Again, it is convenient. It's right off the road, great ingress and regress. Our chargers are, placed in a great location within the parking lot. You plug in, and as I said, you charge, for me, it's 5 seconds. You plug in and you walk away. And that's what you do with our stations. You plug in, you walk away, you go use the restroom, you get, beverage, visit the beef jerky counter, which is, legendary within Buc-ee's. And then you come back to your car and you have a meaningful charge because, our stations are all 400 kilowatt, meaning that, you can charge your vehicle in a very short amount of time compared to some of the other charging networks out there. So we are building to, again, that sort of cutting edge of what, technology is today, which is battery and charging capacity within the vehicles increasing. We want to make sure that we meet that.
I want to ask about IONITY real fast, which is something that we've talked about a little bit on here before. For those not familiar with it, this is the massive charging network that's being built by several automakers in America, just kind of teaming up and being like you said, like we're not satisfied with how the charging industry has served us so far, so the hell with it, we're going to do it ourselves. And IONITY is really promising. They're moving very quickly, but Mercedes-Benz is a member of the IONITY group, so. Is the answer just more is better, or like how does MBHPC fit into what IONITY is doing also?
So we're two very separate companies. So Mercedes-Benz high power charging is an independently operated organization, and we are 100% funded by Mercedes-Benz, and actually our joint venture partner, Emanate Energy, which is our clean energy development partner who's helping us build out the network as well as maintain the assets. So operations and maintenance work as well. So we are the special child within the Mercedes-Benz portfolio of companies. Mercedes has made a minority investment, not a controlling stake by any means, in IONITY, along with other OEMs as well. And to your point, more is better. So IONITY is another charging company. We look at them the same way we look at any other charging competitor. And for us, it's about continuing to challenge each other to build more charging, higher quality charging, more experiential charging. So it's good for the industry and it's good for the driver that we're both executing on our strategies.
Yeah, and I want to circle back to reliability because I think we talked about you have those three pillars. We kind of talked about accessibility, right? Just building more stations, having them be in the right places. Reliability, what has historically, this is kind of one of those things that kind of boggles my mind a little bit, why it's such a hurdle, I guess, just to have a station where you go and you plug in and it kind of just works most of the time, hopefully all of the time.
Yep.
We don't know what we're going to get when we charge our EVs where we own or test. It's just this is great. I got to go plug in. I don't know what the heck's going to happen. It's a real adventure. So how do we cut back on that aspect of this?
Well, I guess, yeah. And my other question was just going to be what historically has been the issues there? What are those sticking points that make it not work so often?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't usually like to talk about competitors, but I will because, one, it's, where I came from, which is Tesla, as well as it is still, some of the gold standards for what, quality means across the network. So why have they been able to maintain such high quality? because their permutation math is essentially 1-to-1, right? So it's a Tesla vehicle,
right?
It's Tesla hardware, it's Tesla firmware. They're Tesla engineers, designing, the OCPI, OCPP connections.
All the same system.
All the same system, doing the O&M work. So, it's a closed system. Take the name away, it's a closed system. Closed systems are usually the easiest to engineer and operate within. What you're looking at within the broader charging landscape is a very diverse and complicated system that is evolving every single month, right? So let's talk about, some of the complexities of that system, right? Hardware. There are a number of different hardware providers, and there continues to be new hardware providers every single, quarter. Firmware. There are a number of different firmware providers out there. Some of them are integrated as sort of, hardware, firmware offerings. Some of them stand alone. Firmware is not standardized. Some of the communication protocols have not been standardized in the past, even down to things like fault codes. This was a big effort, put on by the joint consortium between DOE and DOT was, guys, if there are issues, let's just have the common language on how we communicate those issues.
Right.
It hasn't existed in the past. Now let's talk about, the OEM side, the vehicle side there. And this is great. This is great from a consumer perspective, which is there are new cars on the road every single month, and they're great. I just walked by, the new Cadillac Escalade, EV, and, I was like, wow, that's a cool looking car, right? And we just announced our CLA, which is an amazing vehicle. I mean, completely changes the game in terms of electric vehicle technology. So you take all of those variables and you put it back into that permutation soup, and you get a million different combinations. So it really requires people working together to help solve these challenges. Standardization will be big. Improving hardware quality will be massive. Creating standards around OCPI, OCPP will be super important. Having these things like charring and testing and all of that. And then the last thing I'll say is, there's a level of consumer education that's important as well, because, if you show up to a charging station, and I kid you not, I've seen this happen, and you take out a credit card, and instead of, tapping it on, the payment terminal, you stick it into one of the air vent slots, and then your credit card is gone. that can also, so again, I think there's a lot of things as an industry that we need to, solve here, but I'll tell you what, the challenges are clear, and now we just need to go do the work.
We call this a problem of entrenchment at InsideEVs, which is just like, again, the automakers are used to just people showing up. It's like, well, they've always shown up to do the thing they've always done, so they'll do it here. And it's like, not quite. And to your last anecdote, like when I owned a Kia EV6, first time, right after I bought it, I was driving home. The first time I fast charged it, there's a kid in an old Chevy Bolt plugged into a 350 kilowatt station, which is way too fast for his vehicle. And I was like, let me give you some advice on like why you just overpaid for electricity, my man. And he was just like, I don't care. I just want a fast charge. I'm like, all right, well, don't worry about it. Like people don't know yet. Like everybody out there doing this, you're probably on your first EV or at most your second at this point, except for a very small cohort of people that have been rocking Teslas since like 2012. So there is a big education component. How do you think automakers and your company also, how do you think you can really do a more stepped up job of that than we've seen in the past?
Well, I do want to comment just on my own experience as well, because that's what I do love about the EV sort of driver base today, right? It's a supportive community.
Yeah.
So, every time you show up at a charging station, someone is, supporting and kind of helping educate, the surrounding, base of drivers. If it's your first time, there's always someone to lend a hand. I say that, that's not enough though, right? We have to be able to get charging to the point where it can pass, the grandparent test, right? You have someone who is a first time EV, owner who shows up, who's not as tech literate as, maybe a different, generation, and they know how this thing works. It's intuitive, it's easy, it's, very few steps. I think
works every time.
I think the answer is, a few things. One is we've got to eliminate the number of steps to use charging. So when you show up, things like authentication and payment need to be simple, but you also need to solve for multiple different use cases. So on the Mercedes-Benz charging network, we do accept all forms of payment. We are, moving to be plug and charge compatible across all OEMs. We do accept credit cards, tap to pay. So even if you make it simple, you got to be able to make it accessible and equitable, and that's something that we really strive for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's almost like not necessarily educating people, but making the experience such that they don't really have to know what's going on behind the scenes. Like, you don't have to know, how many kilowatts you need or whatever. It's just like you show up, you plug in, you get on your way, and like the experience is easy.
That's the ideal scenario. I mean, beyond that, we're doing some cool stuff, leveraging, generative AI and chatbots, and, thinking about ways where when there are questions, we can help, respond to those in real time. We're also looking at, that sort of white glove service that is, akin to Mercedes-Benz, which is, the gas station model has worked for generations, in large part because, there's an attendant there. If something goes wrong, someone can come out and literally provide a helping hand. We're looking at that, but now in a scalable way. How do we do that? So, that is a representative model, maybe not literally having an attendant in every location, but that type of helping hand that can troubleshoot when there are issues. What is that for, the EV charging business model? That's what we're going to continue to pull a string on.
A human interaction, right? It's an underrated thing in a lot of ways. And I remember, I think back to like how many decades did we have gas station attendants in this country? Like when did that really kind of fall out of vogue, I guess? I don't know, like the 70s maybe? I mean, it was a long time where people got that leg up on this technology as we started, like, getting motorized, right? Like you kind of need some help to get there.
Or if you're in New Jersey, where you still have your gas by someone else. So, yeah.
This is why I never stop for gas in New Jersey in my gas car, just on principle, because I can't abide it. It doesn't work for me. I want to talk about the landscape a little bit right now too. It's an interesting time with EVs and EV adoption. We don't have to get into like specifics on partisan policy, obviously, but like we kind of expected a different environment for EVs with the new administration coming in. But honestly, so far this year, sales have been great. And yet, it looks like the federal funding initiatives for EV charging are they've been hit pause on that. They could be going away for good. How does that affect your business, and how does that affect the charging ecosystem as a whole if there's not as much federal support as there used to be?
Yeah, I think maybe just to answer your question directly and then to circle back, one, there will not be a big impact on our business. And two, from a fundamentals perspective, I am extremely bullish on the EV market. To answer the second sort of point first, I mean, first principles, right? There are more makes and models of new cars on the road every single month. And usually it's supply that drives, demand and EV adoption. To see the commitment from OEMs and the mix of vehicles that are coming out, that is a huge indicator of which way the market is going.
Yeah.
Number two, if you actually look at, and I love this quote by Peter Drucker, which is, demographics are destiny, right? If you kind of take away the politics of, what's happening in DC and in the headlines, and actually look at EV ownership and EV sales, as you said, like the numbers are increasing. People are buying these cars and people enjoy these vehicles. I mean, they are, more performative, more technologically advanced, lower maintenance. We still need to work on the affordability piece, and we still need to work on the charging piece. But, it's great technology, great product, and we're seeing that continue to be the case. The other side of this is, and maybe, less about the MSRP of affordability, but the affordability around ownership. I mean, I love this as a stat because it kind of speaks to what sometimes is a political conversation, which is actually the most fuel saving states are actually predominantly the states that voted for Republicans in this last election. So in terms of where affordability is winning out, it is predominantly in those red states. So I think, from a baseline perspective, we are still very bullish that, EV penetration and EV demand will continue. That said, I balance that with, I think as an industry, if you look back 5 years, 10 years ago, maybe 5 years, I think we were all very, maybe overly optimistic about how quickly this transition would happen. And I think what you're seeing right now in the marketplace is a little bit of a refinement on how that transition will unfold. So at Mercedes-Benz, what we talk about is we don't want to, force the driver into any vehicle. We want to provide the flexibility of choice and really, the flexibility of powertrain. So in our, upcoming vehicles, you'll see almost a very similar design aesthetic across the full fleet, all by you have the ability under the S-Class to pick a gas engine, or you have pick hybrid, or pick an electric drivetrain. So flexibility of choice and the luxury of choice is something that we're going to lean into. From an industry perspective, we are seeing a sort of pullback, obviously, in DC around some of this federal funding, right? NEVI, qualifying funding going to the states going forward, most likely will not continue, and that's hasn't been sort of determined yet, but I think we can probably say with confidence that it will not. Same with 30C. I think some of these things still need to kind of work themselves out. But that said, states are still committed to these initiatives. So things like the low carbon fuel standard program in California, Washington, and Oregon have been huge, kind of accelerants for the ZEV market in those states. As well as, California still remains a leader that sets policy for, 11 to 15 other states within the country. So,
and they're not going to back down on that.
They're not going to back down. So all that I think is still positive for the industry. For us, we based our business model around the fundamentals, not around federal or state level funding. So we don't see a big impact on our business model. We are building towards foundational utilization and demand within the market. So less impact on our business model writ large.
Mm-hmm. And so is it like, when you see kind of growing EV demand slowing a little bit more, like as in it's not hitting the rates that, the industry thought it would, let's say 5 years ago, and you have these policies, going away, does that impact the rate at which you're looking to expand the network? Or is it kind of like, well, we know that there's still this mismatch. There's still too few charging stations for too many EV owners. And so we're just still going to build exactly the same amount that we were going to.
It's the latter. It's probably the latter. Nice. I think, especially in the near term, I think, over the long term, we'll continue to monitor, and, it won't be about deploying less capital. It'll be about our capital allocation strategy, because again, I think some of these states will continue at pace. If there is sort of an adjustment in certain locations, I think it will be by the state level, not by the overall, fleet size. California, again, back to, what I think we're all aware of, the videos of people, queuing in California and having to wait, in line down the block before they can even get a charge.
I've done that in Texas too. Yeah, it's the worst. Yeah.
I mean, that's a problem that needs to be solved today, right? So that's what we're looking to solve.
And I wanted to ask one question that's not strictly Mercedes-Benz related, but charging industry related. There was this news last week from BYD that they have developed a 1,000 kilowatt, charging system that basically allows their cars to charge at 5 minutes for 250 miles of range. Like, this is something that is,
faster than a gas filler.
3 to 4 to 5 times more power than we see in America from most cars and most stations. Like, in general, what would it take for that sort of charging power to take off in America? Like, is it a vehicle limitation? Is it a charging station and kind of grid limitation? Like, where do you see the challenges there?
This is a watershed mark for the industry, right? Advancing the speed at which you can charge, that has always been one of the concerns from prospective current EV drivers, which is, I don't want to sit around for an hour and charge my car when it takes this long to fuel, my tank in my traditional gas vehicle. I think there's a few things that we need to anchor to here. One is, 5 minutes is super fast. Do we need to charge in 5 minutes? The answer is probably no, because actually the average dwell time for filling up your gas tank is about 10 to 12 minutes. So that's actually the number that we're solving for. I think people just want to go faster. Number two on what the announcement actually means BYD, their announcement around this, charging breakthrough was really the vehicle side of the equation, right? Because for charging to work, you need to have a handshake. It needs to be the ability to take the charge, and that's what BYD announced, which was their new battery technology and onboard voltage architecture, which allowed them to charge up to that power capacity. The other side is you actually need that power available on the charging side.
Yeah.
On the charging
the infrastructure side. Yeah.
Infrastructure side. On the infrastructure side, we can get there, right? I mean, you see megawatt charging for larger trucks. You do see companies, releasing, this type of voltage capacity over time. We've made the commitment on the Mercedes-Benz high power charging network to always be at the cutting edge for what the cars can accept. So today, 400 kilowatts is above and beyond what any vehicle in the market can accept. That said, if you can read the tea leaves here, guys, and I won't say anything, objectively, but if you can look at our new CLA and what we launched the other day and the capacity of that vehicle, you could probably indicate what direction we're going from a charging network, because, we just released a vehicle that has an 800 voltage architecture. So, as you think about, the ability for charging to get quicker, it's really about continuing to make sure that handshake is coordinated properly. So, yes, on the vehicle side, this is a huge breakthrough, and hopefully this, technology continues to, trickle down to the industry. Mercedes-Benz is already pushing that envelope ourselves with our 800 volt architecture around the CLA. But now the charging companies need to step up and make sure that we can deliver that power so that you can charge at that rate. And that's what we're continuing to do with the Mercedes-Benz high power charging.
And and I think you're right that one of the kind of things that people missed in this announcement was that it's not about, BYD can now supply 1,000 kilowatts from a charger. Like that's something that the industry has been able to do. You just need enough cooling and whatever. It's that's not the complicated part. The really hard part is the vehicle side. One thing that I'm wondering is, as somebody who knows a lot about what it takes to connect these stations to the grid, to get the power supply necessary, when you think about a future with potentially megawatt charging for passenger vehicles like this, how big is the challenge of literally just saying, okay, we're going to need a football stadium's worth of power available at this location? Or is that kind of something you're already doing with 400 kilowatts? And so a megawatt, whatever. What's the scale of the challenge there?
Yeah, I want to answer your question, but I also want to, maybe say something about, charging power and charging time before I do.
Sure.
Because
yeah,
I do think that, again, this is a amazing breakthrough. The industry will follow. That said, faster is not always better. I like to say that, we want to lower inconvenience, not necessarily increase speed and increase power. So what do I mean by that? Lowering inconvenience is essentially wasted time, right? When we think about charging should match what you're doing at a location. So I'm just using this as a, hyperbolic example, but having 1,000 kilowatt charging at home would make zero sense, right? Because most of the time you plug in, you spend time with your family, you go to bed, you wake up in the morning, it's 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours later. That's where level 2 charging is perfect, right?
Right. The car's parked, it might as well be. If you're not doing anything else. Yeah.
So now let's work our way up a little bit, right? If you show up at a movie theater, you still don't need 1,000 kilowatt charging. You need something that matches a 2-hour dwell time. If you show up at a coffee shop, yeah, maybe you want something faster, but still it's a 15-minute stop to go in and out. And maybe in the future, when you have the Mercedes-Benz, and Starbucks relationship, you can order ahead, you show up, it's integrated into your loyalty and rewards platform, and it's a 5-minute experience. That is maybe the ideal scenario for that. But there's only a limited number of use cases where that actually makes sense. So I think that's really important just for the audience to understand, is that this is important. It's important to promote the message that charging can hypothetically and in certain use cases deliver power, at this output and at this speed, but it's not the predominant use case.
Honestly, that's a better way to frame charging speeds to most people. We found we started talking about kilowatts to normies, they fall asleep or leave. So it's coffee break, movie, maybe like the Brutalist length movie, and then Sleeping at Home, and like that's how to understand this better, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in the future, imagine a world where you're planning your trip and you say, I want to go from point A to point B. I want to go from, my house in, New York City up to, I don't know, the Catskills, or up to Vermont, or up to, Montreal. And I say, look, I want to grab a cup of coffee along the way. I want to have lunch along the way. And then I'm going to stop at my hotel on the other side. And, your route planning, essentially figures out all your charging stops for you and modulates where you stop to how much power you need. So again,
that's awesome.
It's about limiting the inconvenience. I think that's the equation that we want to get home. Is it's less about time and it's about eliminating unuseful time. So your second question here was on the utility side. So let's talk about utilities. I think, the number of stations that we have, right now that have been built and are essentially just waiting for utility interconnection is a pretty large number. That is less about power capacity, and it's more just about capacity of utilities across the board to work with charging companies, but not just charging companies. It's to work with anybody that needs to, interconnect to the utility or to the grid system. I think we know that's a challenge.
Permitting is a part of this, I assume.
Permitting is a part of this. I mean, it's an even bigger challenge when you have, rotating utility crews moving off of, let's call it normal services to critical services. I mean, look what happened last year with the hurricanes as an example, right? You send utility crews, all over, rightfully so, to support these critical needs. So, coordinating with utilities is a long lead time initiative. I think, a couple of years ago, we had transformer shortages. So that was another issue around utility coordination. Grid capacity is an interesting one. I mean, it's definitely one that we talk about as, a hypothetical challenge. I think in some areas, yes, there are hot spots on the grid today. Will there be more hot spots going forward? Yes. Will we need to solve these? I think, yes, we need to bring more capacity onto the grid, and how much renewables and other, energy sources will play into that. I think the answer is yes and yes. But I think, today it's less about capacity issues and it's more about coordinating timelines appropriately with utilities, given sort of the long lead time nature of, that relationship.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess my last question, this has been such a wonderful discussion, Andrew. I really appreciate your talking about MBHPC and just sharing your experience in this space. If someone's out on the road and, they're low on electrons and they see a Mercedes-Benz high power charging, signage or station somewhere, and they're like, I would give that a try. Tell them what they can expect when they go there.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is a boring answer, but you pull up, you plug in, you walk away, and I think the exciting answer is you go have a great experience on site. So the experiences that we want to solve for are those those great lunches, those great cups of coffee, those open spaces where you can take your dog for a quick walk. So the Mercedes-Benz charging network is the fastest charging network, open to every driver, easy to use, high quality, and we really anchor towards what you do while you charge. So that is what we want people to walk away with. I'll leave you guys with this. One of my favorite charging stories is speaking with our quality team within the larger Mercedes network. And it's really a team that travels across the country, uses every single vehicle, not just Mercedes, every vehicle out there to test them and kind of put them through the ringer. And, time and time again, the charging experiences that they talk to are the ones where it's not the charging that they remember. It's, what you do while you charge. It's that great, co-op market. It's that great, picnic bench. It's the, free Wi-Fi. So all of that sort of emotive, connection to the driver and letting them get back to what they like to do is what you can expect in the Mercedes-Benz charging network. So we're excited to continue to build out our network and put more, chargers in the ground and help support this industry move forward.
All right. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. That was a great conversation.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Guys. Yep.
Now it's time for Plus Minus, our segment where we look at who's up and who's down in the EV world this week. Tim, who you got for me?
I think everybody is down this week pretty much.
Minus is everyone.
Yeah. I mean, we got to talk about the tariffs. Like, I think we'll get into this more maybe next week as we know the fallout. But the lowdown is Trump just announced 25% tariffs on all imported cars, on also a lot of quote unquote like key automobile parts, so engines and transmissions and stuff like that.
And it hits parts too. Yeah.
This is going to be absolutely devastating for auto manufacturing, for car prices. It's kind of like unthinkable in a lot of ways for the auto industry. Especially when you're talking about Mexico and Canada. U.S. manufacturing is built on the back of manufacturing that also happens in Canada and Mexico. It's like all the same industry, the North American
cross
industry.
the border many times over. Cars cross the border many times over for assembly. Yeah.
And like this is all at this point, this is stuff that probably everybody's read about, but yeah, it's just crazy town. Like the idea that after decades of basically free trade across North America for cars, that now there's going to be gigantic tariffs and all this stuff. It's going to be a shit show. It's going to be a shit show for car companies. And
that's the technical economic term too. You can read that in any business textbook. That's what they'll describe it as. It's true.
Yeah, it's like and on a kind of personal level, like I don't know, do I care that much about how much profit automakers make? Not terribly, but this is going to be really bad news for just like car prices and for the economy.
It's bad for the broader economy. Yeah.
We're about to go back to, like, if you remember 2021, like just when we were kind of coming out of the pandemic or during the pandemic, when there was no supply of cars and prices went absolutely insane and you couldn't get a used car for less than like 20 grand. Like, we're about to see that exact same thing happen just because car companies are going to start producing less. There's going to be less supply. There's going to be higher prices. It's going to have all kinds of ripple effects. And like on a personal level, I want to be able to buy things that aren't going to bankrupt me. So this is bad news.
That's generally my preference too when it comes to buying things. It's like my mind is also like I can think of, if these tariffs go into effect, like two like big losers off the top of my head, right, for the minus this week. One's Volkswagen, which has a U.S. factory, but is really dependent on production in Mexico and Germany. And then the other one is Mazda. Poor little Mazda. Pour one out for those folks every day. One of the last small independent car companies around. Late to the EV game, unfortunately. But otherwise, they make great products and stuff I really like driving. But Mazda's U.S. presence is tiny comparatively. Like they make almost everything in Japan. So I think moves like this put Mazda's survival at risk. And the U.S. is also Mazda's most important market. It's not really much of a player elsewhere. Like there's a non-zero chance this could kill that car company. So I don't know. I guess they just need to hurry up and like build a plant in the United States on April 4th or something like that.
Yeah, how hard can it be that hard, right?
Yeah. Sure.
We're definitely going to see like we're going to see car models just like stop getting sold in America, like, and especially some of the more affordable ones probably just going to like exit the country because they can't make it pencil out. And like you're saying, whole brands, that's possible. Like this is kind of an unprecedented. It's an unprecedented thing for the auto industry in America.
Buckle up, fam. Well, that's it for us this week. Thanks for listening to the Plugged In podcast from Inside EVs. We'll be back next Friday as always. Today's show was produced by Michael Perkins and is brought to you by the Motorsport Network.
Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, leave us a review, and tell a friend to tune in. It'll really help us out. And if you liked what you heard, you can find all our EV coverage on InsideEVs.com. See you next time.
Thanks so much.